Welcome to Transform, Tomorrow's Thinking Today, your guide to the way groundbreaking innovation and digital transformation are reshaping our world. You're tuning into part 2 of our data centre series. In this episode, GHD's Andrew Morrison, Australian market leader for property and buildings, continues the conversation with Tai Hollingsbee, Head of Sustainability in Asia Pacific, Samuel Benson, Co-Founder at OceanBit, and Harqs Singh, CTO and Co-Founder at InfraPartners. This time, the focus shifts to what's next, unpacking the future of data centres. Let's dive back in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Transform. This is part 2 of our podcasts. In part 1, we covered how infrastructure constraints are driving innovation. Now we shift focus to what's next. What's the future look like? What's the next frontier? And pleasingly today, we're again joined by Harqs, Sam and Tai. So thanks for staying with us to continue the conversation. Welcome, guys.
Hello. Good to be back here.
So in this episode, we're going to chat through the untapped potential of regional data centres and AI inferencing hubs. We'll look at how these emerging models are enabling latency-sensitive applications and reshaping infrastructure investment strategies. And it's something that I think is really a nice bridge from our previous episode where we looked at how technology is really driving innovation and the race. And, it was kind of quite exciting at the end of that to hear about what the future might hold. But I also think that there's a big feature that we didn't discuss, which is looking at some of our regional locations, which perhaps traditionally haven't been the focus in the market. The market has primarily been focused in big city locations, often for latency reasons. But, I think that we are seeing a big shift to the opportunities that are available in regional locations for things like AI training, as one example. But maybe to start with you, Sam, are you able to perhaps give us some insights as to why regional locations are becoming more and more viable for our data centres?
I guess this does link quite nicely to the previous discussion we had, but the regional appeal is coming because the resource availability in the central populated cities is diminishing. So with, I guess, lack of access to the approvals for development, land, water, energy in the cities, then you see these developers are looking elsewhere for solutions to satisfy that demand. So that's where they cast the net larger and broader, and they find out where the markets that don't require the immediate service of inner city connectivity, they become a viable customer in these regional locations.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also think one of the other things that I am personally keen to see is that making sure we don't get like a great digital divide where it becomes sort of, those that live in cities have access to the greatest technology in AI infrastructure, digital infrastructure, compared to those in the region. So that's the other pleasing thing, is to hopefully enable that for the regional communities.
And that's a great point, because connectivity in regional zones is increasing incredibly quickly. The interconnections between countries are increasing at an incredible rate. And internally, infrastructure developments are now including high connectivity for these restricted access areas. But what we are trying to use as our target market is that regional interest and finding a demand where we can connect to landfall locations with quite a small latency and still provide a reliable connected service that can satisfy that regional demand.
So, okay, that's quite interesting. So you're finding that the regional component offers the opportunity to connect closer to it, where there's an ocean near a regional area, to achieve the latency parameters because you're nearby a regional town or a regional area.
Yeah, it goes down to physics, and forgive me for not being too technical on this topic, and Harqs can jump in. But I've got the great reference that we're looking at Fiji and would love to have our breakout development there. And we've got a round trip of 30 milliseconds from Sydney. And so that's a service that really is quite functional for quite a lot of different consumers of data, which is where we're targeting to build up our customer base.
Super interesting.
I think it's fantastic because also with the shift away from the big city centres and also, looking to advance manufacturing and build communities and sort of the old hub and spoke model, we need to be able to provide the digital infrastructure to enable those cities and communities to thrive. And so I think that's the opportunity there to, not just for private investment, but for government to start to incentivise investment in regional locations to really make sure that the industry is keeping pace with the rest of the globe. And I guess on investors, Tai, I'm interested to hear from your point of view and what you've been seeing in the market around some of the opportunities that investors can unlock the value in regional locations.
There's so many things you could potentially unlock. But I mean, Harqs, when you think about like communities and landlocked areas or infrastructure investors, like when they use the word value, what do you think they mean?
In terms of from an investor perspective, I think it means long-term sustainable returns and having their brand associated with some positive change for society and the world. So I think it's the mix of those. And I think if you look at this AI space over the next 5 years or so, it's going to be the biggest deployment of capital in human history. And so the early investors who I think deploy capital wisely will get very good returns and be able to sort of grow exponentially with this. We're just starting. We're really early in the race. And I think, as Andrew mentioned, we need to make sure the digital divide isn't there. And if you look at the growth of usage of ChatGPT or other models, we're at about 1 billion people using them. There's 8 billion people on the planet. And I think all these efficiencies that are happening are fantastic. And I think we need to go further. We need to reduce the cost of these models from $200 a month for the high-end ones or $20 a month for the regular use ones down to $2 or 20 cents for 8 billion people around the world, regardless of which situation they're in, to be able to use it. And so we need to enable that through efficiency, and technology is the biggest efficiency driver you'll find. And we've seen this in the past, the cost comes down at orders of magnitude, but the growth in terms of users will go up. And I think providing that level of intelligence to every human in the world, I'm really optimistic that there's some smart young people around the world that are going to create some magic with it. And I think that's our responsibility is, through using behind the meter, sustainable power, putting the data centers in place, providing the GPUs, bringing down the cost of these models, especially on the inference side, is our responsibility to enable that future. And so I'm really curious once we get to 2030, 2035, and hopefully we've got the cost down to something like 20 cents a month for folks to use. It's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of that.
I might jump in on that one as well, because I'm quite heavy in this topic currently. And one of the great synergies that we have with OceanBit is that we are looking at power generation and data center provision as a bundle. If we can do data center as a single service, fantastic. But for the discussions around infrastructure investment and development, they are still locked into thinking infrastructure as energy, water, and other basic services to the community. Data is not an infrastructure kind of thing. It's still just a telco investment. But linking that data center development into something that can underwrite the development of energy as a massive development, knowing that you've got a data center providing a guaranteed consumer for X amount of years, that stability breeds more investment. And so, it's kind of using the data center demand as a leverage to actually do greater energy development that is going to service the community where that development may not have been financially feasible prior to that.
Yeah. I think my colleagues Sam and Harqs have helped me answer that question.
Yeah. One of the things we haven't touched on is that, in regional locations, there's the ability to build closer to the generation. So looking at, being able to build closer to renewable energy sources, being able to build closer to different water supplies. And, that enables things like AI training to be done in regional locations. So those sorts of opportunities out in the regions to get investment into AI training is huge. Also, just due to geopolitical challenges at the moment and where things are being built and being invested, there's sovereign capability with a lot of uncertainty in the globe at the moment. Being able to train your own capability and knowledge of data and the ability to control data and to get smarter is going to become a sovereign capability, if not already. So I think that, being able to do AI training on home soil in regional locations is going to become more and more prevalent across the globe and will not just be limited to a select few nations. And look, we did just mention latency there and some of the, challenges, but also opportunities in the regions. But one of the challenges with regions is latency. But we might actually zoom back into the opposite end of the spectrum. And perhaps, Harqs, I might start with you just to talk around what ultra-low latency is and why it's important for data centers, and what's the sort of some of the types of uses where ultra-low latency is going to be important in data centers.
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. So I think, as you mentioned, there will be some regional and there'll be some national capabilities. I think there's general intelligence and then there's sovereign models, as you mentioned, and geopolitics is providing another nuance on top of that, especially with the rise of sort of nationalism. In terms of ultra low latency, where it becomes really important is on the AI inferencing side. So inference is where AI is monetized. That's where you deploy the models and people prompt them, and that's where you pay the subscription, whichever model you choose to use, to be able to get the replies to your prompt and the intelligence and tokens that you need. So inference at scale is going to be distributed, and being close to, users is really important in that sort of ultra low latency. And users today, I think, are humans, but users in the future might be machines. And so it really depends, although we think about it as cities, it also depends on what entities users are. So I think as we unpack that as we go forward as an industry, it's about being close to whoever that user is. And we've found to be able to deliver distributed AI and inference, you need a standard rapid deployment model. You need something that's standardized that you can deploy in multiple ways. And this is where the prefab model does really well. And so the inference side, to your point, there's a data security piece. So, if you think about the sovereign models are going to be for national security, but there's also going to be civilian capabilities as well. So a country will make available government services to all of its citizens, essentially. And so that will need to be inference for citizens, and returns will be significant here in the sense of lowest risk returns. The sovereign models and the sovereign deployments, I think, will be most attractive to investors, and then it will go down to who are investment grade, and then it's some more of the more speculative stuff, essentially. So ultra low latency, data security, and investors is really all comes together with AI inferencing around general intelligence and sovereign models.
Yeah, and just as one example of the machines, it's things like self-driving cars. I certainly hope that it doesn't take too long to make a decision when something runs in front of the car. You certainly want that ultra-low latency there so that a decision can be made by AI. Yeah. So I guess the other thing for with you on the line, Harqs, is, what do you think in the sort of next wave of data center projects with, like you said, speed to market, ability to get projects online quickly? What are sort of investors looking for in the next wave of data center projects?
Yeah, I think as we look at the next wave, and as I mentioned, we're early in this space, but it is going to be the biggest deployment of capital in human history, as I mentioned. And so the early investors who get in and pick the right bets, I would say, are going to do really well and probably have really attractive returns in the longer term. It's almost like we're at the start of the internet era, but it's going to accelerate a lot quicker. What happened in 20 years in the internet is going to happen in 5 years with AI, essentially. So there's huge opportunities here if investors pick the right places to back, essentially. And I think, as we mentioned earlier, power is the biggest constraint. And so it's about how do you get the most out of that power? And the way to get the most out of that power is to be able to deploy the most tokens, deploy the latest NVIDIA chips, and have data centers that evolve with the speed of technology. And that's what we're focused on, is to be able to do that. And so whether it's behind the meter, the power that Sam's generating, or this grid power, it's about saying, okay, we have a limited amount of power. How do we get the most amount of tokens? And that's how you grow revenue, essentially, is the number of tokens that you're able to deliver and the intelligence you're able to deliver. So I think you need to make sure you look across the whole chain, as we've mentioned before, the whole stack, the whole ecosystem, and then also make sure you find the right sort of models and the right risk-adjusted projects to get involved in.
Yeah, and Sam, just interested in your views as well in terms of where you see the next wave of projects coming, particularly perhaps in some of those regional locations, and what it might mean for OceanBit.
Certainly a portion of the market that I'm watching closely is the sustainable development of these data centers. So we're seeing constriction in all major cities. The bottlenecks are stretching, and that constriction isn't going to go away until the demand goes away. And Harqs is pretty confident this demand is here to stay, and I agree. And so the next wave is moving to a tiered structure of deployments of data centers that are not reducing value for the communities around them, that they're not impacting the resources required for everyday life, and are adding that extra value. And really, that's what we are targeting. We are trying to target the demand that is growing for these regional data centers. They're being pushed out of the major cities. They're being sent to locations that people kind of go, well, we don't have the power available yet, so we can't, what are we going to do? We want the data, but we don't have the space, we don't have the energy, we don't have the water. And OceanBit wants to be there saying, well, we've got a solution for that, and it's baseload renewable energy, and we're not going to take any land.
I think I'll just add to what Sam mentioned there. From an investor perspective, there's about $70 trillion, which is going to pass from baby boomers to Gen XYZ in the next 20 years. And the idea is that $70 trillion, as it passes to the next generation, that'll be invested in more of the ESG, sustainable, renewable kind of opportunities, projects and funds. And so there's a huge amount of capital which is going to transfer and be invested in these areas. So I think you will see that capital will flow over time as well into these spaces, and it'll become more of the norm.
I think one of the other things that we perhaps haven't touched on, and just before we move to finalise, is the reason why there's a demand for data centres, and why do data centres exist? It's because it's going to enable progress of the human race, and it's the next evolution, and it's really exciting to be part of. And I think the challenge and the opportunity at the same time for all of us is, what is the role that we can play to enable that change and the legacy that we leave for the next generation? As you mentioned, Harqs, $70 trillion worth of funds being passed from the baby boomers to the next generation, and certainly a significant portion of that will be on digital infrastructure to enable that productivity and the efficiency. So it's a really exciting time for all of us. And I guess with that, I'm keen to hear, if you had $10 billion, so $10 billion, pick your currency, let's call it US dollars, in the industry, where would you be investing? So you've got $10 billion, where would you invest? I'll start with you, Sam.
So I did introduce myself as a co-founder of a startup. So no, I won't take that cop out. To be fair, I would be looking at a strategy of the standardization and prefabrication. And Harqs, maybe if I had that 10 billion, maybe I'd try and come across the pond. But I think that is increasingly the required strategy to be the best in field, is ensuring that you've got a standardized, repeatable process that ensures that you can get the best efficiency out of that construction phase, reduce lost time, and really just ensuring that you've got best-in-class, fast development capable, tied in with a solution that brings in that social license to continue to operate. Because, fast development is great, but without that continued social license, that $10 billion is not coming back.
Well said. And Tai, where would you invest $10 billion?
$10 billion is a lot of money, but it sounds not like a lot compared to the 70 trillion that's about to be transferred from one generation to another, or indeed the multi-trillion that's going to be spent in the next 10 years. Can I cheat and give 5 to Sam and 5 to Harqs? Is that cheating?
What about me?
Actually, you're fine. We're fine. We're right. No, but that's a cheater answer. But maybe is there something in like setting up a global competition where the person who gets to a PUE of X, Harqs, say a number. What's a magic number that you'd love to get to?
In terms of PUE or in terms of investment?
PUE.
It needs to be sub 1.1.
Yeah, right. So the first person that can get to 1.05 gets $10 billion.
Sam, what's the PUE of OceanBit?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, when the power that we're generating is through moving a lot of seawater that is coming out at the system at 17 degrees Celsius, we have excess cooling that requires no energy to move it because we've consumed it in the power generation cycle. I believe we are very close to 1.
Therefore, you might win the 10 billion. Congratulations.
Great competition, Tai. I love it.
And Harqs, interested from your point of view, where you would invest $10 billion?
Yes, Andrew, we did some maths on investment required in the data center space and in the AI space generally. And to build a 1 gigawatt data center, to just build a data center is about $12.5 billion. To fit it full of chips and GPUs is probably another $35 billion. And so to have a gigawatt of GPU cloud is in the order of about a $50 billion check size. So I'd come back to you and ask for 5x what you're giving me and say I would build a gigawatt GPU cloud powered by renewable sustainable energy and ideally supporting some sovereign AI workloads, which is the lowest risk from an investment perspective. And hopefully, like we said, giving everybody Einstein level of intelligence in their pocket and then seeing what does that enable and what does that give to humans around the world.
Nice. For what it's worth, I'd be picking some communities in need and investing, co-locating data centers with some community benefits alongside it so that we really change some of the narrative around data centers at the moment, because I think the industry needs it. And I think that being able to demonstrate that data centers can give back to the community and be a really fundamental part of the future for the next generation and the legacy that it leaves is really important, because we're not going to change the world of data centers with 10 billion, but we will change the lives of a few communities that really need it. So that's where I've been investing my 10 billion. But look, we're unfortunately out of time, but it has been an insightful and amazing discussion. We could have talked for hours. I think it's been fantastic. And we started with some of the opportunities in regional locations, and then we've moved to some of the specialist examples where speed to market is really important, which is things like AI inference, low latency locations, and the benefits that prefabrication can bring to data centers, with also the likes of OceanBit with PUEs close to 1 that bring very sustainable solutions to those regional areas. And it's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you, Tai. Thank you, Harqs. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Andrew.
See ya. Bye.
Thanks, Andrew.
You've been listening to Transform, Tomorrow's Thinking Today, a podcast for GHD produced by Sound Cartel. Follow Transform free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.